Dragon Ball fighting games. There's a ton of them, from the top of the iceberg of very well-known fan favorites of the franchise, to the hidden under the ocean games that people either don't know about, or would much rather forget ever existed. Most anime will have at least one fighting game, as it does follow well with their original properties, especially the major ones. Even excluding the bountiful amount of anime I haven't talked about yet, I've already covered 2 different franchises, and they still have plenty of other fighting games I haven't even touched. And now I'm adding Dragon Ball to that list, and boy does Dragon Ball have a lot. When you first think of Dragon Ball games, it'll usually be the fighting ones, whether it's the most recent one with a massive competitive scene, or the old ones that usually get a bunch of sequels, and people generally give the best praise to the third one. Anime games did that a lot back then for some reason. Anyway, today I'll be looking at the first Dragon Ball Z Budokai and see if it still holds up now in comparison to 20 years ago. Goodness, I feel old. This game has all of the important moments up through the Cell Saga. I won't be explaining what happens in the story because it's Dragon Ball Z. If you really don't know Z's story, I'm surprised you're even watching this video. Instead, I'll go over how it's overall presented because you actually have to go through the storyline twice. The first time is mostly from Goku's perspective, with you mostly playing as him, and the second time you play through the same story as other characters. It's kind of an odd way to go about it, if I'm being honest. Why not just go through everything at once instead of going through the storyline twice? I'm guessing it's so you get used to the feel of one character and thus the overall gameplay before adding in others whose movesets are different. But due to that, the storytelling comes off as kind of awkward. The other thing to bring up is the what-if stories that this game has. I'm not sure how the what-if scenarios originated, but this game has one what-if scenario for the major villain of each saga, with you able to take control as them. For the most part, they are pretty typical of villain wins instead of the heroes, especially Frieza's. But for Vegeta's, he gets so angry at Yajirobe bringing up Nappa that he ends up suddenly going Super Saiyan, and for Cell, he accidentally absorbs Krillin and gets beaten by Yamcha and Tien. But then it turns out that that was just a nightmare that Cell had during the 10-day wait until his tournament, which I find incredibly hilarious. If this is the start of the what-if stories for the Dragon Ball games, then I'd say they do well enough of a job, and the best one is without a doubt Cell's. I want to start off with the music of Budokai because the OST has some of the most well-known Dragon Ball music in the games, and they are absolute bangers. However, there is a problem with it, and it's kind of a big one. In case it wasn't already obvious, I'm playing the HD collection version of Budokai and not the original one, which for the most part actually doesn't matter that much to my knowledge. It's in HD, obviously, but the main thing that is different is the music. The HD version uses music from some other Dragon Ball games. Now, why would they need to do that for the HD version? Most collections might remaster some music, but replacing the songs outright is typically never done. Do you know that one thing in school you're told not to do? Okay, saying that out loud is extremely vague. Point is, the composer of the original version's music, Kenji Yamamoto, plagiarized actual songs for a lot of the soundtrack. And it's not even just Budokai either. At least this introduced me to a new band that I like, so there's that. But seriously, don't plagiarize stuff, okay guys? The intro for the game, as well as the beginning of every saga, is a recreation of the intros for Dragon Ball Z, with Rock the Dragon for the English version and Chala Head Chala for the Japanese version. Nice little representation of that, and it's very appreciated. This and the cutscenes of the game are honestly pretty impressive at times, doing a very good job at displaying certain aspects of Dragon Ball, like the Saiyan hair flowing. That was done magnificently. At the same time, a lot of the special move animations are reused between multiple characters, but just go by different names. However, there are also unique animations for a fair amount of the cast, and those are pretty good. By the way, I really like the menus overall. The chibi used for the character select screen, all the art for each game mode, the stage animations for the stage selection screen, and the art used for the World Tournament matches that are different depending on which side the character is on. Because of all that, the game overall looks better than Saga's, so at least the bare minimum has been achieved. But going back to the representation, it's a bit all over the place, but in a good way. Despite the story only going up to the Cell Saga, there is some stuff from the Buu Saga, as well as Dragon Ball GT and even some filler episodes from the anime, if I'm correct. This is mostly displayed through the alternate costumes that characters have, and I find that to be incredibly cool to have almost everyone have some form of referential costume rather than just recolors. The color for the Kamehameha is quote-unquote odd, because in the anime it's blue, but for the game it's yellow. However, in the colored manga it's yellow there, so that gets the pass there for being a bit of a weird quote-unquote inconsistency. What doesn't though is the voice acting. Most of them are the same from the anime and they do good jobs, which isn't the weird part. Honestly, having really good voice acting and the same voice actors are highly expected from anime games. What's weird is that Cell has his first form voice for most of the gameplay, but still has his final form voice for a few lines. I'm not sure why this is a thing, because this isn't something that's fixed with the rest of the Budokai series either, if I'm correct. In classic fighting game fashion, two people as one of 21 characters face off against each other to reign supreme as the last one standing. You know, unless time runs out, in which whoever has more health wins. Both fighters move around in a 3D arena with the ability to sidestep. The two opponents use a combination of punches, kicks, and ki blasts to damage each other. On the other hand, they can play defensively by holding up their guard to block attacks and ki blasts, in addition to being able to deflect them. Dash attacks and chargeable heavy attacks are also possible to use against enemies, but the heavy attacks have a special property. When two heavy attacks clash, the fighters battle it out in a burst to see who wins the clash. Other options also exist for fighters involving their ki meters and the exciting skill system. That's not me giving it praise, that's literally what it's called. The Exciting Skill System, or ESS for short, has 7 skill slots, and these slots are how characters contain skills from 3 typings: green guard abilities, blue physical attacks, and red death moves. Guard abilities are passives that automatically occur whenever the situation calls for it, but the physical attacks and death moves require bars of ki to use, with that amount varying depending on the move. These are either transformations which give a boost to power but constantly drain your ki meter over time, or powerful attacks that instantly use said meter. If need be, you can charge your ki, by the way. The game has a variety of game modes, so let's start out with the story mode. As I already stated before, you go through it first as Goku mostly, and then as some of the other characters afterwards with preset skills for battles. But from here, you are able to get some skills and unlock most of the playable characters. Then there's the duel mode where two people can face off against each other, and here you are able to use a customized skill set if you made one. You also have training mode, which you use to train, obviously. The World Tournament has you fight in multiple matches in an attempt to win first place, and for these battles the time is unlimited, but on the World Tournament stage, ring outs are possible. Winning second or higher gets you Zenny, which you can use at Mr. Popo's skill shop to purchase more skills. This game is very technical. One of the main reasons is due to the approach with how combat in the 3D stages is handled. It's similar to Tekken, which has wall bounce continuations along with environmental transitions. Granted, you can't combo off of the transitions, but they do add damage. Now that I think about it, quite a few anime games do this quote-unquote Tekken approach, which is interesting. Anyways, another major aspect is how the game handles its knockdown state. Enemies can be knocked to the ground in a variety of ways, however some of these methods won't give you a hard knockdown because the enemy has the chance to tech once they hit the ground. At the same time, some attacks give hard knockdowns or make the timing for teching a little bit harder than normal, and there are options that you can do because of this. You can ki blast for a little bit of additional damage, and if the enemy doesn't tech it, you can keep throwing ki blast. You can charge your ki, whether to use it for an attack, a transformation, or a ki blast. Or you can taunt, which takes away 1 bar of ki from the opponent. On top of that, remember those transformations that I brought up before? Transformations typically go down if you're in a knockdown state under a certain amount of ki. So if you're not able to tech properly or you get put into a hard knockdown situation, there goes that transformation. This is what makes hard knockdowns and teching both incredibly important mechanics to the gameplay, as a lot of momentum can be swayed in one's favor because of it. And if you really wanted to, the ESS has a lot of options for you to choose from, and there are a couple of factors involved in deciding what to pick. The power of some skills increases with multiple slots filled with that same skill. Some skills can only be used once per battle, some skills take up multiple slots, and more. But you have to remember that you only have 7 slots, so you're forced to be very mindful with the choice of what you take or not. And they can make battles very different because of what you chose to give yourself access to. Because of all of this, the game is pretty fun on a casual level. Normal for each character in duels is usable. Some are better than others, of course, especially with something I'll mention later, but it does feel like you can use anyone casually. If you're looking to play a character deeper though, you will need to consult their move list as there are multiple combo activations for a lot of moves, and they can be slightly different depending on the character, which the story mode does not tell you about, but we'll ignore that. Also, don't get me started on the charge and block canceling stuff, because boy, that stuff is difficult, but it is also cool, and the main way to do combos. But again, I am not good at it. Despite me giving a positive emphasis on customization, you're not able to customize skills for the story mode. It does make sense for this to be a thing, as you'll get more skills as you go through the story mode, and that corresponds with the characters themselves, and that's fine. However, not being able to customize your skills has incredibly big flaws when you just don't have options sometimes. The biggest example of this is the final Goku vs Frieza fight. In this fight, you start out in Super Saiyan form. However, 4 skill slots are used for transformations, with 2 other skill slots requiring 3 bars to activate, one of which you must be in a transformation to use, and because you're in a transformation, your ki constantly depletes. You do have another special that only uses 1 bar and you can use it whenever, but that means all 7 slots are used up. For those that don't know, the ability to grab requires a skill slot. There are some story fights where you cannot grab in a fighting game. In fact, until you get past the Saiyan Saga, you can't grab. Considering that even on one of the lower difficulties, the AI will deflect 99% of your ki blasts, trying to zone them doesn't work, and fighting them up close without a grab is a terrible option, because you also might not be able to tech, which even then, that situation is rare. And obviously, you'll want to just attack them when you're up close, but when the enemy is just closing and opening their fists constantly, that means they're repeatedly blocking. Which is not only just weirdly threatening, but now you kinda have to hope that you just hit them, and you have to be really committal for a lot of these combos to work. And if they don't work, chances are you can be punished for it if you're not using any block canceling or anything like that. Some story fights just feel unplayable because of all that. I also very much wish that there was more ways to get Zenny. You can only get Zenny through the World Tournament, and that's only if you end up in 2nd place or higher without losing once, which is pretty difficult to do because of the World Tournament stage's knockout rule. Granted, this is somewhat of a get good situation, but not getting rewarded any Zenny for how much time is spent in the story mode is definitely aggravating. Sure, you unlock characters and some skills from the story mode, but considering that any further content is locked behind the shop with no way to access it, including a Hercule game mode along with Hercule as a playable character, customization for characters to use in casual play, and most of the Dragon Balls, you aren't left with much else to do if you can't get through those tournaments, and having all that content blocked off just because of that is kind of annoying. So, the transformation thing I brought up earlier increases a character's damage output by 10%. This doesn't sound too bad until I tell you that it stacks. For each transformation, it's another 10%, which then kind of makes characters with multiple transformations really strong and anyone else not so strong. However, you do have to play a very campy way in order to pull this off, and it's also risky for stacked transformations since you need previous transformations also equipped in order to get the stronger ones. It's also heavily reliant on you being able to tech properly, because if you can't, well, your transformation will just be gone. So, high risk, high reward, I guess. By the way, you gotta manhandle your controller to win bursts. Now, just because older Dragon Ball Z games are kinda notorious for this type of thing, doesn't mean I can't criticize it for completely obliterating your hands or controller. To be fair, it is pretty rare for these bursts to come up, but seriously, why did so many Dragon Ball games do this? Being truthful, this game is a pretty good first start for the series. There's definitely some stuff that has aged, but for the most part it still shines well now. Combat overall is pretty intense, if only for some fights kinda handicapping you. The story mode is a nice way of going through the DBZ storyline, however a fair amount of content after that is locked behind the completion of one really tough game mode that does make it a little harder to keep going single player wise. Again, great start, however, there are some things that this game could learn to do better. Good thing more games for the series came out, huh? What's going on, my fellow residents? It's me, TheFrozenCavern, and thank you guys for making it to the end of this video. So, the last Dragon Ball game I played was Sagas. Yeah, this game is way better than that. And speaking of that video, I did that review alongside Shadowstick, a friend of mine, and he actually did a review on Dragon Ball Z Budokai. So, a little shout out to him, go watch that video. But outside of that, I want to know what your guys' favorite Dragon Ball game is, and if you say Sagas, I will ridicule you. But anyways, make sure to go down to the description below because that's where all of my social medias are located. Like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Discord are all in the description, and they are always for you guys to be notified of another video or whenever I have an update for the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more, as well as share this video out with your friends and family. But until the next video, take care.